Good morning. Welcome to Cool Springs. Today is Sunday, November the 30th, 2025, and this is the last of our series for the month of November of lessons on giving thanks. And today's title is Giving Thanks No Matter What. And I'll ask the camera to go to the board for just a moment because we're going to go several places in the Scripture, and you can have a moment to jot these down right quickly, because some of them we're going to look at, some of them we're going to talk about. We're going to be in two places in Job. Job chapter 1, verses 21 through 22. Then Job 19, that's an important one. We're really going to take a look at Job 19, 23 through 27. I will then make reference to Daniel chapter 12, verses 8 through 13. And we're going to talk a good bit about Genesis 45, verses 1 through 14, and then I'll make a reference to Revelation 22. The Genesis 45 passage is where Joseph, who was, as a young person, sold into slavery by his own brothers, and he has spent decades now in Egypt, where he's gone from slave to prisoner, in prison for a false charge, a crime he did not commit, to the number 2 man in all of Egypt. And now there's a famine, and his family has come down to Egypt looking to buy grain, and they don't recognize him because he's been in Egypt for decades. He dresses like an Egyptian. He speaks the Egyptian language to them, even though he can understand them when they're having their private one-on-one conversations. They don't recognize him as their brother Joseph. Why would they think that the guy that they sold into slavery decades before is the number 2 man in all of Egypt? But now he's going to reveal himself to them, reconcile the family back together. And I'm giving you this much background right now because the story of what happens to Joseph has some parallels in another story that directly affects you and me. Over here I've got a reference to the Pilgrims, the ones who came over searching for religious freedom in the 1600s. And I'll make reference to why these numbers are here when we get to it. But the story of the Pilgrims in the 1600s, 400 years prior to our day and time, but very important to the foundation of our nation. Those little you throw the stone into the pond and the ripple goes all the way across the lake. And sometimes you see the ripple going all the way through and sometimes you don't. Well, because we're on this end of history, we can look back and see how events that happened hundreds of years before in the place that we now know as our nation, before it even was a nation, have effects that impact you and me today. And we're also going to talk about how perspective matters. People see things, people experience things, and you can choose how you react to them. And a lot of times it's what happens in your mind and your heart, the way you choose to react and respond to something that happens, that makes a world of difference. So that's just kind of a setup for we're going to spend some time in this part of it. We've already looked at Nebuchadnezzar, who was a pagan at first, and God was good to him, and he didn't get the memo. So he kept trying to do things his own way until God had to get his attention. But the good news is God kept after Nebuchadnezzar, and finally Nebuchadnezzar came to his senses for real and praised the one true God. Then we looked at the second week at how God's love endures forever, through good times, through bad times, through everything in between. We looked at the 10 lepers. They were on the border between Samaria and Galilee. Most of them were Jewish. One guy was a Samaritan. And the one thing that allowed him to be part of their group was they found something in common. They were lepers. They had nobody but each other to hang out with. They couldn't hang out with other people. And Jesus healed them all. He didn't just heal the 9 Jewish guys and tell the Samaritan, sorry, you're not one of us, you're on your own. He healed them all. And it was only the Samaritan who showed thanks. And then last week we looked at Jesus giving thanks for food and we looked at communion. And today we're looking at being thankful no matter what. This past Thursday was Thanksgiving Day in our country, and all kinds of messages kept showing up on social media. Some of them with like holiday hints on how you can prepare your turkey or whatever other meat you're going to have, because not everybody knows how to prepare a turkey. And others were coming up with tips for surviving the holidays, because holidays aren't always joyful times, particularly when somebody is going through a period of grief because they've lost someone. Maybe they lost someone right at that holiday or on the day itself, or just the time of year makes them sad that the person is gone. And so there were a lot of online things about how you get through the holidays and looking for ways to find joy again, which really kind of deals with being thankful no matter what. So now we're going to go back to the table and we're going to look at Job. First of all, Job chapter 1, Job doesn't even know what the source of the trouble that he's about to experience is coming from. It's really coming from a conversation, basically a challenge by Satan, who is a fallen angel, but who at this point in time and eternity is allowed to come into the presence of God. And God is pointing out, Satan, look at Job. He's one of my followers. He's doing the right thing. And Satan immediately tries to twist it. Well, of course, he's worshiping you. After all, you've blessed him in every way. Why wouldn't he serve you? You've been seeing to it that he's taken care of financially, that he's got a good family, that he's got his health. Why, if you were to strike him or allow me to strike him, he would curse you to your face. See, it's a matter of the brain. How you look at things. And so God decides, all right, I'm going to let you put Job to the test. But God sets limits on Satan. And that really just chafes Satan. He has to stay within the limits God placed on him. Because you see, the original sin was Satan, Lucifer, used to be the angel who led the worship in heaven. We know this from passages in Isaiah, that Lucifer used to be the one who was leading the worship at the temple in heaven. And he wasn't satisfied with that. He wanted to take the place of God. So he started a rebellion and got a third of the angels to follow him. And that was him falling, those angels falling, and Lucifer took the form of a serpent and went into the garden to now try to take away from Adam and Eve, God's creation, the power that God had given them. And in that case, he was temporarily successful. But God had a rescue plan in mind for Adam and Eve. And you and I are the results of the continuing working out of God's plan to redeem mankind back to himself. So Lucifer's now down on earth, and he's going to strike Job. And he's not just gonna put Job to a little bitty test. No, he's going to hit him with a whole truckload. In the first chapter, the verses that we're not going to read for time's sake, but in the first chapter, Job is going about his life, and he has no idea that this conversation between God and Satan is taking place. Because you see, you and I, because we're down here on earth, for this point of our eternal life, you are going to live eternally. Your only choice is, what's your final destination? Are you going to live continuously in the presence of the God who loves you, who's come up with this rescue plan for mankind? Or are you going to let your mind get twisted and let your heart get twisted to go along with it and choose not to follow God, in which case your eternal destination is separation from the God who loved you and a place of torment? Job's just minding his business. Satan comes down with limited permission, but he's going to take that to the absolute limits. Kind of like when you were a kid, or maybe even as an adult for some of you, you know just how far you can push against your parents, your teachers, your employer, your neighbor, whoever it is, before something's going to snap and judgment will come your way. Satan's going to go right to the limit that God gave you. In a matter of a single day, he's going to attack Job's herds and flocks. One person, one servant will escape to tell Job that this raid has occurred and they've taken off all your property and killed all your servants, and I'm the only one who escaped to come and tell you about it. Then there's going to be another destruction that comes that's going to wipe out the fields. The animals are gone, the fields are gone. In other words, all the economic wealth is gone. Just like that. Then there's going to be another messenger who comes and tells him that there was this great whirlwind, tornado, and it just happened to strike the house of Job's oldest son. And it just so happened that they were all of Job's children, the children's spouses, maybe the grandkids, whoever was there in that house, all of Job's family were in that house, except, interestingly enough, Mr. and Mrs. Job. And they're having a feast celebrating at the oldest son's house. And the tornado strikes the building, and it collapses on them, and everybody dies, except the one servant who escapes to tell Job about it. He's at his house. He's just gotten word that his herds have been taken away, that someone else has come in with a raiding band and they've stolen all of his crops. He's instantly penniless. Now he gets the word that he's lost his entire future. All of his children gone in an instant. He's reeling from that news. Absolutely reeling. You may be right now thinking in your own mind of when you got some tragic news, whether you were called and summoned to a hospital to be by a loved one's bedside or to be at their house as they were in hospice type care, and it was obvious the time was getting close, and so it was time to hurry up and get here to be with your loved one before they pass. Or maybe you got the phone call or the knock on the door from military, police officers, whoever, to come and tell you that some tragic news has happened. You can instantly go back to how you felt. And now you can put yourself in Job's shoes as he hears tragedy after tragedy after tragedy, and now total calamity. All your children are gone. You see, it's one thing to lose everything you've worked for all your life through some sort of economic hardship or through some natural disaster, whether it's a flood or a fire or some other natural type disaster. In fact, a lot of times when people are the victims of those kind of things, and you see news reports and reporters are talking to people who have barely escaped with their lives, they manage to find the glimmer of hope. Today also happens to be the first Sunday of Advent, when we light the first Advent candle, the candle of hope, light in the darkness. And a lot of times people will be standing there and they've lost everything except their lives. But if their family escaped, and maybe if they have their little pet with them and the pet was saved, they're still thankful, even though they've lost everything they've worked for. A few years ago, the town of Gatlinburg, Tennessee, which is a very famous tourist destination in the Great Smoky Mountains, had some wildfires that came through. And there were lots of video and lots of news reports showing people literally trying to escape this wildfire that was running out of control. And they managed to just barely get out with their lives. Some people didn't get out, but some got out, got to safety, and they were just thankful to be alive. Because after all, they realized, yeah, the things may be gone. Most stuff can be replaced, and even those things that can't be replaced, you know, your family heirlooms, your wedding dress, whatever the thing is, you still have your life. You got your memories, and as long as you're alive, even if you can't take out Mama's china anymore because it got burned up in the fire or washed away in the flood, you can remember those times when you sat at the holiday table and had the celebration. And so in your mind and heart, those things still bring you comfort and joy. Job, though, has in a single day gotten not one report of tragedy that struck, not two, but three. Boom, boom, boom. And that third one was the worst of all. All my children are gone. It just so happens in our family's case, I remember Thanksgiving Day 1990 because one of my siblings, my brother Charles, died while running in a Thanksgiving morning half marathon. He'd passed his physical on Monday and was cleared to run in the marathon. And his heart wall blew out partway through the race. And our family got the word as people were gathering at Mama's house to celebrate Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving Day from that day forward has always now been a mixture of, and I'll borrow a phrase here from one of my cousins who posted this past week because his mama died of cancer earlier in the month of November. And he posted that this Thanksgiving was a mixture of celebration and sorrow. And I reached out to my cousin and said, yes, it's going to be that way for a while, and it's wise for you to remember that it is okay to celebrate Thanksgiving and to celebrate your mother's life. And it's okay to admit that you have sorrow over the fact that she's no longer able to be at the Thanksgiving table. Why can he celebrate? Because his mama was a Christian. He knows where she is. And he knows that he's going to see her later. Celebration can go with sorrow. Job is very, very BC. He is from the time of the patriarchs. He's gotten this horrible, horrible news that he's penniless. He's not homeless, but he is penniless. And that he's lost all of his servants, the means of gaining more wealth. And that most importantly now, he's lost his future. Why do we do the things we do? We want to spend time with our families and pass on something to the next generation. Not necessarily just whatever our material goods are. We want to pass on the family stories, the legacy of the family. We know that even after we pass on, there are these members of our family who are younger than we are, who will carry on for the next generation and generations to come, a testimony that we all lived. And we want to share the love and the meaning behind that. Job has lost everybody that mattered to him. And his reaction to that, this is where I want us to pick up the reading in Job chapter 1. And I'm going to pick up the reading in verse 18. While he was still speaking, that's when Job was getting message after message after message about the tragedies that had befallen him. While he was still speaking, yet another messenger came and said, your sons and daughters were feasting and drinking wine at the oldest brother's house, when suddenly a mighty wind swept in from the desert and struck the four corners of the house. It collapsed on them, and they are dead. and I am the only one who has escaped to tell you. I remember exactly where I was when I got the telephone call from one of my brothers that Mama had passed. She'd been in declining health for some time. I'd gone up to be with her the weekend before and was planning on coming back a weekend later for a family wedding. And at 10 minutes to 6 in the morning, the telephone rang. And when your house phone rings that early in the day, it's never good news. And it was one of my brothers telling me that the hospice center had called and said Mama was beginning to shut down and we all needed to come. Well, I'm the one that lives the furthest out, and knowing that this was a possibility, I already had a bag packed. So while I'm up hurriedly getting dressed, Mark goes and fills up my car, tops off the tank at the gas station up the street, puts the suitcase in the car for me, and I'm on my way from Enterprise towards Atlanta. And I was north of Montgomery on the interstate, out in nowhere land. Between Montgomery and the city of Auburn, there's just nothing on the way there. And I was on that stretch of road when the phone rang again, and it was my brother, who happened to be a police officer. And the first thing he said to me was, "You can slow down now." His way of telling me what we knew. I can remember where I was sitting in the house several years later when I got the phone call that I thought was going to be my daily update from the ICU on how my husband was doing during the pandemic. And instead of getting the daily update, which the day before had been good news, all of his readings were within the normal ranges except for one, and it was only slightly out. So I wasn't expecting to hear, "I'm sorry to have to tell you this." There are certain things that you remember that are frozen into your brain forever. You can remember where you were, what you were doing, who you were with, or if you were by yourself. And you can also remember how you felt. Your heart hitting the floor. Job's reaction to hearing tragedy, then a worse tragedy, then the worst of all tragedies. All your descendants, all your children are gone. He wasn't expecting a storm to come up and hit his son's house and take all of his kids with him. Job hears that news, that emotionally crushing news. They are dead, and I am the only one who has escaped to tell you. At this, Job got up, tore his robe, and shaved his head, the common way that people would use to show that they are in mourning. Then he fell to the ground in worship. In worship? Fall to the ground weeping, crying out, screaming, tearing at your hair. Those we can understand. Because we put ourselves in Job's shoes for a minute. And you don't even like to think about hearing terrible news like that. Job gets up. As soon as he hears the word, he does what mourners would do, tear their clothing in just the utter grief. He shaves his head and he worships God. He got up, tore his robe, shaved his head, fell to the ground in worship, and said, "Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will depart. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. May the name of the Lord be praised. In all this, I want to think about that phrase. In all of this, losing everything in the blink of an eye. In all this, Job did not sin by charging God with wrongdoing. You can be hurt. You can be confused when tragedy happens to you. You can be in pain. You will be in pain. You cannot understand. You can ask why. What you can't do is get and stay angry with God. If you have a flash of anger, you need to rein yourself in or listen to the wise counsel of family or friends who are trying to pull you back from going to some very dark places emotionally and reminding you that God loves you in spite of your loss, in spite of your pain, in spite of your suffering. Job here isn't going to have a whole lot of comfort come his way from human beings. He's going to have 3 friends show up. The entire book of Job is dealing with 3 friends from different places hear about the tragedies that have befallen Job, and they've come to comfort him. And that's what they think they're doing. But they've also come to judge him. Maybe they're jealous of him. And most of the book of Job is each of these friends in turn saying, Job, you must have done something wrong for God to do this to you. And their thinking is the thinking of a lot of people even in our day and time. Particularly those people who are proclaiming the prosperity gospel that, oh, if you do this and you do these things, that God guarantees you that you're going to have wealth and health and all these good things. And then, of course, when life rears up and bites them, obviously something's wrong, and we can't blame God, so we must blame you. Somehow you didn't have enough faith. Somehow you failed to do something. Somehow it's you. Because people who have that idea have a very wrong idea about God. It's not a tit-for-tat type of arrangement where if we check all the right God boxes and say and do the right things, that we're somehow guaranteed that we're going to go through life trouble-free. It's not how it works. We are sinners living in a broken world, and we can expect that if things can go wrong, they will. You can celebrate the birth of a new baby, particularly if that baby is healthy. But what do you know? That baby's going to grow up, and it's going to experience hardships, and that baby's going to make some wrong decisions, some bad choices, and other people are going to do bad things to that baby, and finally, by the time that baby's an old man or an old woman, they're going to die, because that is the world we live in. But at the moment, you're focusing on the cute baby. Job's friends have come to comfort him, but they have this idea that, Job, you must have done something to offend God. So they give him 2 pieces of advice each time they're talking to him, and it's like going between good cop and bad cop. Job, why don't you just curse God and die? It's all over with. See, you can go down the depths of despair. What's he got to live for? All of his wealth is gone. The means of getting new wealth, he thinks, is gone. And the people he was working hard to provide for the future, those kids and those grandkids or those future grandkids that he wanted to have to make sure that they were taken care of, they're gone too. And on top of Job's losing his family, Satan's not done yet. God said, I can't kill you, but I can make you very sick and very miserable and very uncomfortable. So he gives him a skin disease that itches and itches and itches and itches. The closest I can think of, and it's no comparison really, is I can remember as a child when I had the chicken pox. And Mama said, don't scratch. But it itches. And all the calamine lotion in the world still doesn't stop the itch. I was 7 when I had the chicken pox. 61 years later, because I'm 68 now, I can still see evidence of 7-year-old Nancy didn't listen to Mama. There are some chicken pox scars on my arms and legs where it itched. And I kept scratching. And even the scratching didn't really take care of it. Job's having to scrape himself with pottery. And he's got these friends who are basically telling him it's all your fault. And part of the advice is go ahead and curse God and die, which is the despair, the depression. Really, you've come all this way, hundreds of miles, to supposedly comfort your friend, and your advice to him is curse God so that God will just strike you dead? Did you come to comfort me, or did you come to hang around for the funeral that you think is about to happen? And the other advice, besides, why don't you just curse God and die, is, Job, you need to confess. We want to hear it. We want to know what you did. Come on, Job, give us the juicy details of what it was you did. You must have done something. Were they looking to comfort Job or to gloat over him? It's in the middle of this series of back and forth conversations between him and these 3 friends who are piling on like a gang, a mob, telling him, it's your fault, you need to curse God and die, or it's your fault and you need to tell us what you did. That Job's had this conversation. Now we're in chapter 19, and I do want you to turn to chapter 19 because this is an extraordinary statement of faith of a man who is thankful to God no matter what has happened. He's still trusting in God in the worst moments of his life. He's experienced the loss of everybody and everything, even along with having to scrape because he's got this skin disease that is just driving him to the point of madness because he's itching and it hurts and he can't get any relief or comfort. And on top of it, Satan decides for good measure, all right, God, you won't let me kill him? But I'll even give him bad breath, halitosis. And we know that because Job's wife, the person who should be his comforter, but who has experienced loss herself, everything that Job lost, she lost in the way of the material wealth and the children. And yes, some people may be offended by this, but so be it. You down deep, you know that a mama losing her children is a deeper connection than a father losing his, because of what she went through to bring those children into the world. Yes, both moms and dads mourn when they lose their children. But that now out of the womb child, at whatever age that child is, 4, 40, 84, mama has a connection to that child because she carried that child in the womb. So Mrs. Job, not named here, is suffering too. And she's seeing Job in his skin condition that she didn't experience, but she's got to stay just distant enough to where, what if that's contagious? And she tells him that even his breath is offensive to her. It stinks. He needs human comfort. And he can't get it. She can't hug him. I can relate to that. Oh boy, can I relate to that. When you want to show love to somebody, but either because they've got a disease, whether it's a leprosy like the 10 men we looked at a couple of weeks ago, or whether they're in isolation and you physically can't get to them, or even if you're there because you've got to stay masked up, you can't even kiss them, hold their hand because there are tubes sticking out all over the place. Whatever she wants to do for Job, and whatever she needs from him. Just a couple hugging and crying in each other's arms over what they've lost. She can't have that because he might be contagious. And Satan went so far as, okay, just to show you, I'll give you bad breath too. Satan doesn't love you. God loves you. But a lot of people, have deceived minds, and they're hearing the twisting lies of the world, and they don't see things the way they really are. Even his wife isn't comforting him. And his friends have just gone through another session of piling on, blaming Job for all of his troubles. And in chapter 19, I'm going to start the reading in verse 21 because I think you can now put yourself in Job's shoes and imagine what it would be like to have this much pain, this much suffering, this much hurt, and this much cold comfort from people that you thought you were your friends, people you thought you could rely on. You can almost hear in your mind's ear the crying out of Job. Have pity on me, my friends. Have pity. He's not feeling that they have sympathy for him. He's feeling their contempt, come on, Job, tell us what you did. Attempts to be salacious. He's certainly not getting comfort. These people aren't telling him, Job, God loves you, it's going to be all right. These friends aren't very friendly. For the hand of God has struck me. Well, it's not really that God's hand has struck him, it's that God has allowed as a test his hand of protection to be removed. Satan's the one who's been striking Job with all this. Why do you pursue me as God does? Will you never get enough of my flesh? That's his way of admitting, guys, you're making things worse. It would have been better if you hadn't showed up at all, because you're not providing any comfort to me. Job's in a dark place. And he's starting to think some dark thoughts. But because he's so grounded in his knowledge of God and in his worship of God, when he's worshiping even through his suffering and pain, when he's worshiping God, when he's giving thanks no matter what, there's just enough inner light to pull him back from the brink. Oh, that my words were recorded, that they were written on a scroll. Well, guess what, Job? All these words, the words of these sorry friends, and your words, they are going to be recorded because somebody was there taking notes. Oh, that my words were inscribed, that they were written on a scroll, that they were inscribed with an iron tool on lead, or engraved in rock forever. I know that my Redeemer lives. And if you look at the word Redeemer there, it's capitalized because that's a title for God. I know that my Redeemer lives, and that in the end, he will stand upon the earth. And after my skin has been destroyed, yet in my flesh I will see God. I myself will see him with my own eyes, I and not another. How my heart yearns within me. What an extraordinary statement of faith. That inner light of faith in God was calling Job back. He's in some dark places. He thinks it's God's hand that's against him. he doesn't know about the fact that Satan's been given permission to put him to a test. He's seen the limits of what Satan can do, because Satan went right up to the limit. I'm not allowed to kill him, but I'm going to do everything short of it. Everything. All at once. Not one thing, then wait a little bit, and then hit him with something else, then wait a little bit and hit him with something else. No. It's going to be a tsunami of trouble. All at once. At the moment, Job's still thinking, God, why is this happening to me? But even when asking why, even when wondering, even when suffering, what does Job know up here and know down here where it really counts? I know my Redeemer lives. Job's real BC. He's not a descendant of Abraham. He's a Gentile. But he's heard about the existence of God. And he's been worshiping God. He knows he has a Redeemer. He knows that after his flesh is destroyed, and the flesh that he's got right now is pretty destroyed, he still itches. He's still having to take the broken pottery and scrape and scrape and scrape and scrape and scrape. He knows that he's going to die one day. But what else does Job know? I know my Redeemer lives, and I know at the end God wins. He's going to stand, and I know that I'm going to stand. That even after I die, I will see him with my own eyes. Job knows that physical death down here on earth is not the end of the story. As I was reading this passage, some of the people in this live audience were responding to it, because I'm able to look at them while I'm talking here. And some of them were no doubt thinking in their mind the tune to a song, because there's a song in all the hymn books. I know my Redeemer liveth. It's taken right out of this passage. To keep that which I've delivered unto him against that day. Job has given himself to God, and he knows his Redeemer lives. And he knows at the end he's going to stand. He's able to withstand every attack that Satan has. And by the time the book of Job comes to an end, God has shown up. And in spite of Job's why questions, God responds by asking Job a few questions that Job can't answer. Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? And God also lets him know, Job, you've been righteous. Now, Job knows it's a test. He didn't know it at the time he was going through it. Now his friends know, because God tells them, you need to ask my servant Job to pray for you so that I don't destroy you. They now know how wrong they were. Job was thankful to God no matter what. But he's not the only one. I said I'd make reference to Daniel chapter 12, and we will go very briefly there. Daniel is toward the end of his life. He's gone through a lot too. Been taken captive as a teenage boy. Had his body mutilated by his captors. He's been given the privilege by God of being able to interpret the king's dreams. And now as an old man, Daniel's having dreams, and Daniel didn't have a Daniel to go to. So Daniel has been fasting and praying, and God has sent the angel Gabriel to answer Daniel's prayers and to tell him what's going to happen in the future. And here in chapter 12, I'm going to start the reading in verse 3. Then I, Daniel, looked up, and there before me stood two others, one on this bank of the river and one on the opposite side. One of them said to the man clothed in linen, the angel who was above the waters of the river, how long will it be before these astonishing things are fulfilled? The man clothed in linen, who was above the waters of the river, lifted his right hand and his left hand toward heaven, and I heard him swear by him who lives forever, saying, it will be for a time singular, times plural, and half a time. when the power of the holy people has been finally broken, all these things will be completed. I heard, but I did not understand. So I asked, my Lord, what will the outcome of all this be? He replied, go your way, Daniel, because the words are closed up and sealed until the time of the end. Daniel has been given this enormous privilege of seeing in visions what was going to happen in world history, end times prophecy. And he doesn't understand it. He just said, I saw and I heard, but I didn't understand. And so he asked the question again to the angel, and the angel essentially is verbally patting him on the head. It's all right, Daniel, you go to your way, to your rest. These things are sealed up until the end time. Daniel is able to trust, not knowing what it is he's seeing, but trusting God for the outcome. You and I need to have a Job-like faith, a Daniel-like faith. And we need to have a Joseph-type faith. We go to Genesis 45, which is where we made reference at the beginning of today's lesson about the fact that Joseph, who suffered a lot at the hands of his brothers, who could have chosen when he saw his brothers coming, and he knew why they were there. They're there for the reason that all these other people are here. There's a famine that's reached over a huge section of the earth. And Egypt's the only place that seems to have grain stored up. That rainy day fund, and Joseph's in charge of it. And his brothers are coming begging for food. And he could have chosen to remember what they did to him. How when they seized him and snatched that coat off of him and threw him in the pit, he was begging for mercy that they didn't show. He overheard the discussion from down in the pit, how most of them wanted to kill him, but how one brother said, no, let's just sell him into slavery. We need to make a profit off of this. And he's experienced years and years of being a slave and a prisoner because of what they did to me. And he could have chosen to respond with bitterness and anger and hatred in his heart. But instead, he asked them some questions, and he's found out to his amazement his father's still alive. A lot of the time that he was a slave in Egypt and then a prisoner, he may have wondered, why didn't my father ever come looking for me? Is he even still here? He's now heard his father's alive, and so he's come up with this test. He's going to send the brothers home with grain, but they got to leave one brother behind. And they got to bring that youngest brother, his biological full brother Benjamin, who wasn't one of the ones who tossed him in the pit, because he was a little boy at the time. He wants to see his father and his brother again. And when they come back the second time, because they've run out of grain again, and this time they brought Benjamin with them, he's going to be so overcome with emotion that he's going to kick all the servants out of the house so that it's just him and his brothers, and he's going to reveal to them that I am Joseph. I'm the one you put into slavery. Genesis 45, starting in verse 4. Then Joseph said to his brothers, come close to me. When they had come close, he said, I am your brother Joseph, the one you sold into Egypt. And now do not be distressed, and do not be angry with yourselves for selling me here, because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you. And he's going to tell them that there's more famine to follow. So you guys, you need to go back home, get Daddy and my brother Benjamin and your families, your flocks and your herds, and bring everybody down here to me so that I can take care of you. He didn't treat his brothers with anger. He wasn't looking to destroy what was left of the family. He wanted them to come to Egypt so that he could care for them. Joseph was showing mercy and love to his brothers. And that ties us into this holiday we just celebrated of Thanksgiving. I brought in from the house a book that I've used a lot in children's ministry about Squanto. Some of you may know the story. Your kids and grandkids probably do not know this story because they've stopped teaching it in school. In fact, the way they teach American history, particularly when you get to high school and college, is twisting minds, saying our country is evil and wicked, and look at this horrible thing that we did where we're on stolen land. When really, it's a case of divine intervention. This particular book was written by Eric Metaxas. Some of you may recognize that name. He's a very famous person in this day and time. And it's just the prelude to the book that I want to read out to you. Every once in a great while, the hand of God is easy to see. And for a brief moment, fairy tales and history are the same thing. This story is about one of those times, and the little picture icon that they put here is of a pilgrim hat and of a Native American hat. Well, I sort of agree with part of what he said here. The fairy tale part, no. But people would think it's a fairy tale. In fact, your kids and grandkids are probably being told in school that if they've heard the stories of the pilgrims, that they've been told a false, sanitized version of it. Now, what the book is about, and what actually happened in history, was Squanto, a Native American from the Patuxent tribe, was caught by fur traders as a slave and carried over to Europe, to Spain, and sold as a slave. And some monks, religious men, bought him off the slave market, set him free, taught him the Spanish language, found him passage to get to England, where he stayed for many, many years with a family, the Saley family, and they helped him learn English, and they helped him find work on a ship going back to where he came from, to the New World. But a decade or more had passed, and by the time Squanto, who was taken captive as a teenager, returned on one of the trading ships, his village was empty because a disease had come in, probably unintentionally brought by the traders, and wiped out his entire village. And he'd had to spend 10 years, first in Spain with those monks who rescued him from slavery, and with this English family that the monks managed to place him with, where he had heard about their God. When the pilgrims show up, he's able to speak their language, and he's able to show them how to live. I've got some numbers up here on the board. The pilgrims. The 1620 Mayflower voyage, more people intended to go, but they didn't all get to go because they had two ships, actually, the Goodspeed, and it wasn't seaworthy to make the trip. So some of them had to stay and come much, much later. Those pilgrims who left from England and the Netherlands coming to the New World for religious freedom had already experienced a lot of loss. Some of them had to leave some of their children behind with relatives or friends because the kids weren't old enough or able yet to withstand the voyage. The 102 people who were on the Mayflower, by the time they got there and experienced that first very cold winter, the winter of 1620 to 21, over half of them died because they were only able to put up one common house, and of course disease spread like wildfire. So out of the 102 who made the voyage to the New World, by the time the first harvest season rolled around, only 50 were left alive. Had they experienced some loss? They left behind their country, their extended family. Some of them had to leave behind members of their immediate family who weren't able to make the trip. And now they've seen their fellow passengers, their whole community, cut over one half by disease. But God provided this miracle. This native man who was able to speak to them in their language. They didn't have to waste time trying to learn how to communicate with each other. And he taught them how to live and survive in this new world. So when it was time for the harvest to be gathered in, these people who'd suffered the loss of their country, persecution religiously, lost their homes, lost some of their family, lost a lot of their friends, they chose to be thankful. And they shared a feast that the natives helped with, and they had friendly relations for quite a while with the native tribes. And the ripple of that effect comes down 417 years after this first Thanksgiving, when God provided a man who had to go through some tragedy and who chose to respond to it not by attacking the pilgrims, because they showed up on the land that his tribe used to have, but now the tribe's all gone. He showed mercy and kindness. They witnessed to him. William Bradford, the first governor of the Massachusetts Bay Colony, told Squanto, your story is like the story of Joseph. Joseph had to go through hard times. Joseph was a slave too. But God meant it for good. Bradford witnessed to Squanto. Squanto became a believer in God before he died. The people who are teaching history now want to try to tell you that, oh, it's all stolen land. You see, they're trying to twist minds. When bad things happen to you, to your family, to your loved ones, Satan will try to twist your mind, to get you to curse God, to blame God, to reject God, to turn away from God. When really, the sin condition that we're in is because Adam and Eve listened to Satan the first time, and Satan's still trying to get people to listen to him instead of listening to God. When you really need to be looking with eyes of wonder and worship, recognizing, as it says in Revelation 22, that the Spirit and the bride say, "Come," and let him who hears come. Whoever is thirsty, let him come to me, and whoever wishes, let him take the gift, the free gift from the water of life. God loves you. You can choose to be thankful no matter what, or you can choose to listen to Satan. Choose wisely. Thanks for watching.